Tonight on KQED Newsroom, 4 weeks and counting. We'll look at how the longest government shutdown in the nation's history is affecting Californians and the toll it may have on flood control projects in the state. Also, utility giant PG&E is planning to file for bankruptcy, what it means for customers, California's clean energy goals, and victims of wildfires. Hello and welcome to KQED Newsroom. I'm Thuy Vu. We begin with the escalating battle over the government shutdown. On Wednesday, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi asked President Trump to delay his January 29th State of the Union address or submit a written message instead. She said without a reopening of the government, there would be security concerns. President Trump isn't budging from plans to deliver his televised address this month. As the shutdown drags on, the Trump administration is considering moving disaster relief money toward building a border wall. That move could threaten numerous shoreline restoration and flood control projects in California. Joining me now to discuss this is Congressman John Garamendi from the Sacramento Valley. He serves on the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee overseeing water projects. Congressman Garamendi, nice to have you back.
Good to be with you.
I wanted to first of all ask you about the BuzzFeed report that we've been hearing so much about. That's asserting that President Trump directed his former lawyer, Michael Cohen, to lie to Congress about Trump's role in negotiations to build a skyscraper in Moscow. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, everybody says, if true, it is a crime and therefore it's an impeachable offense. And it happens to be the same offense that Richard Nixon committed and ultimately was impeached, although he was not tried in the Senate, but he resigned because of all of that. Obstruction of justice, very, very simple. If it is true, we're going to find out. We're moving along. The Mueller investigation is moving along. And now that the Democrats have subpoena power, we're going to find out. And we will.
So what are you saying? You're saying that if this is true, it does rise to obstruction of justice. Will you be calling for impeachment proceedings? Well,
I think there'll be an outcry for impeachment proceedings. And that's both as a result of the Mueller investigation, which may have this information, or the result of subpoenas and other testimony before Congress. Apparently, there's backup information to this charge. We'll see. And it's probably not very far away. I would suggest probably within a couple of months, we'll know what this is all about.
And is impeachment something you would support or call for?
Under these circumstances, absolutely. If this is true, absolutely. This is an impeachable offense.
Okay. I wanted to also ask you about the government shutdown. President Trump did not embrace a proposal this week to fund the government for 3 weeks to get it reopened, to allow time for negotiations. On the other side, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has called the wall immoral. Is there a way forward at this point?
Absolutely. We must open up government. We have passed 9 pieces of legislation in the last 2 weeks since January 3rd for the purposes of opening up government. All are part of it. We've even gone just this last yesterday with another piece of legislation that would give a until February 28th opening government up, keep it going. Why? So that there would be time to negotiate. This is becoming, this is and has been a very serious problem. We're seeing the American economy take a severe hit. We're seeing 800,000 federal employees and who knows how many contractors losing the opportunity to have a paycheck, and the contractors to even have their contracts. I have situations here in the Sacramento area of contractors that don't know what they're going to do because they're small and they're going to be out of business as a result of this. Open up this government. This is an issue where Mitch McConnell has got to lead and not be a puppet to Trump.
But both sides have dug in their heels, right? The president has said he's not going to back away from the $5.7 billion he wants for the border wall. The Democrats are saying we're not giving you that money. So what will be the tipping point then for this to get resolved? Because like you said, so many people, not only the furloughed workers, but many others are now impacted.
Open up the government. Take up any one of those 9 bills that are sitting on the Senate floor. Mitch McConnell, Senator McConnell, and the Republicans have an opportunity to put it on the president's desk. And we've been very clear, open up the government, and we'll talk about what we're going to do. We've offered, in fact, in the legislation that was before Congress, before the Christmas break, $1.6 billion for border security. Then the president, at the very last moment, demanded $5 billion, and then a day or two later he wants $5.7 billion without any specification of where it would be built, what its purpose would be, how it would solve any of the problems at the border. We know that we have to be smart with the taxpayer money. Open up this government. We'll talk about all those things. We know that there's some parts of that border fence that have been built 20, 30 years ago that need to be repaired. We can talk about that. But it is unconscionable that the president would simply hold not only the employees and the federal employees and all of the contractors hostage, but now the total American economy is being held hostage for his campaign pledge.
So how do you think California will fare in all this? Because already the president has said he's threatening to divert money from the Army Corps of Engineers. Some of that money has been already approved for California. Yep. What projects in California are at risk here?
Well, this is something that you're going to do what, Mr. President? You're going to declare a national emergency. You're going to go to the Civil Works program of the Army Corps of Engineers, which we have put about $15 billion for disaster relief. And it turns out that $2.5 billion of those dollars are for California, specific flood protection in the South Bay of San Francisco Bay. We're talking about the Cupertino area. We're talking about the San Jose area, all of that. Flood protection. We know sea level is coming up. We know that Sacramento is the most flood-prone area in America, where you've got more than 2 million people at risk. And small cities like Marysville, 17,000 people. Just $13 million, but that is absolutely critical money on a city that literally is surrounded by 35-foot levees.
So what will happen if these projects are delayed or canceled?
Well, I just drove up the Sacramento River to get here from my home down in the Delta. And the Sacramento River is flowing full right now. Will these projects make a difference this winter? No. But these projects would be underway next winter or next summer, not so many months away, and they would provide additional protection. Would it make a difference? We don't know. But it might make all the difference between a horrible flood or no flood at all. And in Puerto Rico, another $2.5 billion to shore up the levees and the dams in that area, which were totally destroyed in the hurricane 2.5 years ago. It is unconscionable that the president would reach out and take away that money.
So how serious is the president at this point about this threat that he's making?
We've backed him down a bit. But nonetheless, he has kept alive the threat that he has the power to issue a national emergency. And based upon the laws that are on the books, which frankly should be changed, and I've introduced legislation to change those laws, he could dip into the civil works. All right. He could also dip into the U.S. military's military construction projects. We have to rein in his power, not just this way, but also with the national emergencies.
All right. John Garamendi, Congressman from Sacramento Valley, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
On Monday, PG&E declared it would file for bankruptcy protection at the end of the month. The utility says it faces $30 billion in liability costs for wildfires in 2017 and 2018. In a statement, the company said, quote, "We do not expect any impact to natural gas or electric service for our customers. PG&E stock prices have declined sharply since November, when the Camp Fire broke out and killed at least 86 people. Investigators haven't yet determined the cause of the blaze, but some fire victims blame PG&E and have already filed lawsuits. The company is already on probation for violating federal safety rules when one of its gas pipelines exploded in 2010 and killed 8 people in San Bruno. PG&E did not respond to our request to appear on this program. Joining us now to discuss the bankruptcy issue is California State Senator Jerry Hill. He chairs the Senate Subcommittee on Gas, Electric, and Transportation Safety. Thank you so much for being here.
Happy to be with you.
You were the lone Senate Democrat who voted against a law approved last year that allows PG&E to pass on some of the 2017 wildfire costs to ratepayers. What is your reaction to this plan now to declare bankruptcy?
Well, I was shocked at first, but not surprised. They have a cash flow problem, and they need to work themselves through that. And by declaring bankruptcy, allows everyone to step back and take some time and reflect on it.
But they are solvent right now.
They are solvent, and they have a lot of money and a lot of resources, but they don't have a lot of cash. And we don't know what those liabilities will be for the fires of 2018 yet. We're pretty clear on the 2017 ones, but not the 2018 ones. So it is premature, but it does allow all of us now to kind of plan how we're going to look at a utility in California at the end of the day.
Do you think there should be a bailout plan?
No, absolutely not. I didn't vote for a bailout last year, and I would not vote for one today. They don't deserve a bailout at all, and the ratepayers should not be stuck with those liabilities.
So then how will consumers be protected from higher rates as a result of this?
Well, the bailout last year will provide and will call for greater rates and higher rates on all of us going forward. What we have to do is make sure that the shareholders that they pay their price, and that the company itself with its assets cover those costs of liability. There are ways of doing that, but PG&E comes to the legislature and gives us two choices: either bankruptcy or bailout. And there are other options and other choices. In fact, they produced one where they had a backdoor, behind closed door solution to this problem last year. At the same time they were negotiating with the legislature, they had a plan to cover the cost, but they didn't tell anyone about it.
So you've already said you don't think there should be a bailout.
No.
What is the best path forward at this point then?
Well, I think what we have to look at are restructuring the company, whether it's, the legislature last year said that they were too big to fail. I feel they're too big to succeed. You need to perhaps split them off. They have a gas and electric division, which will give them into a position and a size that's more manageable, something that they can work with and not as cumbersome as it has been. So I think that's a first step that we can look at. And then also change the management of the company. It has not been a good management effort and team. Change the board of directors to really change the culture of PG&E. What we want at the end of the day is a utility that provides a safe, reliable service at a reasonable rate. They've failed us.
You seem to be saying that you would support all this restructuring and let them stay private. Do you think the state should take over PG&E? Well,
there are conversations right now. The state probably not take over PG&E, but there are other opportunities and perhaps other governmental opportunities that could do it. San Francisco is right now talking about becoming and taking over the PG&E distribution system within the city. Other cities are talking about it as well.
What about wildfire victims? They're suing PG&E. They're concerned that a bankruptcy will mean they may not get the kinds of payments they're entitled to if they win their cases. Are you planning any legislation that would help them?
Well, and they should be concerned about that, because bankruptcy could wipe out a lot of those claims. But going back many years ago, there was the asbestos settlements and the bankruptcies that were involved there. There were trust funds established for asbestos victims, and we could do the same with fire victims. So at the end of the day, the Public Utilities Commission will have to approve any bankruptcy settlements or restructuring, and that will give us and the state and the PUC an opportunity to structure that in a way to protect those victims.
Is that something you'll push for?
We're definitely going to push for that. That's who ratepayers and victims are the most important part of any settlement that we have to deal with.
PG&E declared bankruptcy once before in 2001 as a result of the energy crisis. Then what lessons would you say lawmakers learned from that situation that could be applied to what we're seeing now?
Well, I think two things. One, PG&E was negotiating with the governor at the time in 2001, and then they were looking to find a settlement to prevent bankruptcy. Then the next day they filed for bankruptcy out from under it, and the governor said at the time, what a slap in the face that was. So what we've learned is, one, you can't really trust PG&E in those negotiations, and two, you have to be able to have a Public Utilities Commission and members of that commission who are honest and who are looking out for the ratepayers' best interest. Back then, during that bankruptcy, we did not have that. We had what I would consider a more corrupting relationship and an incestuous relationship between PG&E and the Public Utilities Commission, and that pretty much gave PG&E everything they wanted out of bankruptcy, which cost us a lot more.
But also there were problems with the CPUC's relationship with PG&E, not only after that crisis in 2001, but even after the San Bruno explosion. It happened in your district.
Absolutely.
We started learning about very cozy relationships.
Yes, very cozy. And that's because the same people who were there in 2001 were still there in 2010.
Do you have more trust in the PUC now?
I do. I have greater confidence in them. They are good people, they are honest people, and they're putting the public's best interest at heart. And that's really what's critical.
And how would you like to see Governor Gavin Newsom handle this situation? He's barely in the governor's office and he's facing this.
It's a tough job for him right now, in a tough position, but I think so far he's done a great job. Because what he's done, he's stepped back. He's kind of evaluating everything. He's not making any rash decisions. And we have to really find out what PG&E is going to do. Are they actually going to file for bankruptcy or not?
All right. State Senator Jerry Hill, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
PG&E serves about 16 million customers over 70,000 square miles. And while it's unlikely their lights will go out, they could eventually end up paying more for their power. Bankruptcy proceedings could also jeopardize the Golden State's green energy goals. A bill signed by former Governor Jerry Brown last year requires the state to get all of its energy from renewable sources by 2045. But investing heavily in solar and wind projects may now be out of reach for the troubled utility. Joining me now to discuss this are KQED data journalist Lisa Pickoff-White, Severin Borenstein, a professor at the Energy Institute at UC Berkeley's Haas School of Business, and Loretta Lynch, a former president of the California Public Utilities Commission, the state agency tasked with regulating utilities. Welcome to you all.
Thank you.
Well, Lisa, let's begin with you. Is a bankruptcy filing inevitable at this point, or could we see a plan emerge over the next 2 weeks that could prevent that from happening?
Well, we could see a plan like that. The state could step in, or the administration, or also PG&E could decide not to file, which does seem unlikely at this time. We also have seen some shareholder activity in the last week. One hedge fund, for instance, wrote a letter protesting the bankruptcy, saying that it's unnecessary.
And so, Loretta, how likely is that scenario? Consumer groups are accusing PG&E of using this bankruptcy decision to pressure lawmakers into giving them a deal. PG&E says it has no choice but to do this because of wildfire liabilities and other liabilities from climate change. What do you make of the company statement?
Oh, it's absolutely PG&E's strategic choice to threaten bankruptcy and perhaps file for bankruptcy in order to leverage the state, the policymakers, and in order to just get as much money as they can out of the ratepayers' pocket.
This does not
need to happen. PG&E has plenty of money. They're talking about future liabilities that haven't even been assessed by CAL FIRE, much less by a court. So, and the PUC has provided them plenty of money to keep the lights on. This is a strategic corporate choice by a corporation that has proven that it is out of control.
And what is the role of the California Public Utilities Commission here? You used to be the president. Is the CPUC partially to blame? Because it is the agency that is responsible for overseeing utilities like PG&E.
Absolutely, the PUC is partially to blame. The PUC, for the last 15 years, has been way too cozy with the corporations it has regulated and has let them get away with way too much. And mostly, the PUC has failed in their central job, which is to keep the system safe, to protect the ratepayers, the victims, and the workers.
So what do you think they should do now, given the plan that PG&E has declared that it will declare bankruptcy?
Well, the PUC is an integral part of any bankruptcy reorganization. The utility cannot emerge from a bankruptcy unless the PUC supports and approves the deal that happens, the bankruptcy reorganization plan. And that's why it's so critical that the PUC is aligned with the new administration.
And Professor Borenstein, there are some environmental implications here as well. California has ambitious plans to transfer to 33% renewable energy sources by 2020. PG&E is currently the state's largest investor in infrastructure for energy efficiency, for electric vehicles. How will this plan to declare bankruptcy affect all of that?
Well, I think regardless of whether they declare bankruptcy, PG&E is going to be very distracted over the next few years with the lawsuits and with dealing with the fires. So this is going to be a major distraction. I've talked to people in the company who are working on those environmental initiatives, and they've confirmed that that's just not where the focus is right now. They're worried about what to do in the next week over the financial issues. this is going to be a much more complex bankruptcy than we saw during the California electricity crisis.
Back in 2001.
Back in 2001, because now we're faced with a lot of choices of how to move forward from here that really weren't discussed then. Nobody was talking back in 2001 about converting the entire utility to publicly owned or breaking it up into smaller pieces. Now we are talking about those, and I think that's going to be a central part of the discussion through this bankruptcy.
And can you give us a snapshot of the potential ripple effect here as well to other clean energy sources that do business with PG&E? Give us a snapshot of how big the market is for that in California and how this bankruptcy could begin to affect those providers.
Well, we're nearly at 33% renewable energy right now. We are headed towards 50% by 2030. There are a lot of providers that have long-term contracts with PG&E. That's one of the things a bankruptcy judge will look at and try to harvest money from. And so this is going to have a ripple effect throughout the renewable community. If PG&E doesn't pay bills and if they have to transfer money. A bankruptcy judge is looking to harvest as much money as they can for a certain set of creditors. And that is their primary goal. And that's not how the company runs or the CP or the regulator is run. So it really changes the focus away from these state goals and more towards simply moving money around.
I would like to respectfully disagree with my good friend Severin. I see several disturbing parallels between the bankruptcy in 2001 and PG&E's choice to file for bankruptcy in 2019. Both of them are corporate strategic choices to be able to leverage state policymakers and to get every single penny they possibly can from the ratepayer. And I also disagree that other options weren't on the table in 2001. Senator John Burton, the head of the Senate then, argued that we needed $1 for a hot dog. If we were going to pay $1, we should get a hot dog, meaning we should take over PG&E's transmission system. That wasn't accepted by the Davis administration then. I certainly hope that the new administration seriously considers all options on the table, because frankly, it's time to get the private profiteering PG&E corporate executives out of the picture, get the profits out, and spend those profits on the victims.
I think one of the things that's also really different than in 2001 is that PG&E is now a convicted felon, and there is
from the San Bruno explosion.
Exactly, from the deadly San Bruno explosion. So they're under a court order to not commit any more crimes, and there's currently a federal judge, Alsip, who is looking to see, and there's going to be a hearing in 2 weeks to see whether, some of these fires in the electrical division instead of the natural gas division, which is what blew up in San Bruno, what's going to go on there. And he's already issued an order ordering PG&E to look at their electrical lines and see whether they are safe right now.
Lisa really has an important point. This is Judge Alsip's order to show cause. And what it does is key and critical. Right now, the probation conditions of the convicted felon, PG&E Corporation, only address the gas system, the natural gas pipelines. The judge is saying for the first time he's going to add probation conditions that address the electrical system, the transmission lines. Now, how PG&E responds and whether they agree or whether they fight is going to be a critical piece of information that we all should assess in terms of their willingness to step up, take responsibility, and do the right thing, or their continued rogue actions as a corporation that denies responsibility at every turn.
So where do you see all of this going, right? Because back in 2001, that bankruptcy deal resulted in a bailout package where ratepayers were saddled with higher rates. Do you think ratepayers will be better protected this time?
No. I think ratepayers are definitely going to pay some of this cost. First of all, there just isn't going to be enough money to cover all of that liability in the company. So some of this is going to get pushed off somewhere. It could get pushed off to ratepayers. It could be paid by the government. It could be foisted on the people who bore the losses. I think the easiest thing politically is going to be to push it off on ratepayers. So I think it's very unlikely that ratepayers are going to come through this unscathed. Shareholders are certainly going to lose a lot of money, probably all of their money. And then we're going to have this larger debate, regardless of the actions of PG&E, what is the right way of organizing our electricity system going forward, given the increasing wildfire risk?
So then should it be a publicly owned utility, and what would be the challenges with that?
It's time. It is time for the state to seriously take a look at the mechanisms that would be necessary to take it over. We need to get the profit out of the system, and it's not a radical idea. Every state in the union has public utilities. Even California has 22, the biggest of which are Sacramento, SMUD, and LADWP. They're not perfect, but they're sure a lot better than private profiteers.
Well, I'm not sure I would agree with that. I think that there are some very good public utilities, but there are also some very good investor-owned utilities. I think the answer is not clear. I do agree with Loretta that we should be considering that alternative, particularly in light of the much greater regulation that's going to be required on the safety side, given the catastrophic risk we face now, that just wasn't part of the situation 20 or 30 years ago. This used to be an industry that widows and orphans invested in because the investments were so reliable. And that's just not the case anymore. So I think we do have to consider alternative forms of utilities.
So how much risk do you think there is of other utilities and businesses across the country facing this kind of stress because of climate change?
Well, I think it's different. It differs regionally. California, clearly, the drought and the forest fire issue is the major issue. In other areas, it's hurricanes and it's floods, coastal flooding, and all of these are going to be a threat. One difference about wildfires is that the wildfire may start because of a utility action, unlike a hurricane. And therefore, there's this question of how much of that they are then responsible for. And to the extent they are held responsible for the entire damage of it, that is more than the value of the firm. And so we are going to see that. Whereas when we've seen problems after hurricanes with utilities, they weren't blamed for the hurricane, they were just blamed for the fallout.
But going back to your earlier point, though, about how you're not sure if it's any better to have a public power company or an investor-owned utility. There are many investor-owned utilities across the nation. It is a common model, but why don't they have the same problems that PG&E has, Lisa?
Well, I think there's a lot of questions about infrastructure and maintenance and who is maintaining those lines. I mean, there's no question that PG&E does have more lines in rural areas of California that can be hard to get to and that are more fire prone. There also are more people living in those areas, and that caused so that when there is a fire, those fires are more deadly. We've seen that, unfortunately, in the North Bay, and we've seen that during the Camp Fire. However, I think that PG&E, they are a convicted felon. There's certainly been issues that they've had throughout the years. I think, to me, that climate change is certainly a part of this, but whether PG&E is maintaining their lines and whether their regulator is ensuring that they are doing so, that's part of this equation.
But I really disagree that we should let PG&E off the hook because of climate change. If that were true, Southern California Edison and SDG&E would have the same problems, along with some of the Arizona utilities that face the same problems of the urban-wild interface. And the only utility that has suffered as the catastrophes it has suffered, and the only utility that is choosing to file for bankruptcy is PG&E. So I agree that there are some good utilities out there who maintain their system, protect their customers. PG&E is not one of them. PG&E has lost the trust of California.
All right, we will leave it there. Certainly this story is not going away anytime soon. Lisa Pickoff-White, Loretta Lynch, and also Severin Borenstein, thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that will do it for us. As always, you can find more of our coverage at kqed.org/newsroom. I'm Thuy Vu. Thank you for joining us.